Right. Thank you so much for the kind introduction. I'm very grateful to the opportunity that you allowed me to listen to all of these very useful and practical interventions from the panelists. But yes, this world is in a crisis. It was in a crisis before the COP, and we hope that this COP will be a start of real change. And that real change will start by identifying proper roles with accountability to all of the stakeholders without mixing up what should the governments do, what should the private sector do, what should civil society do. And there had been a great deal of confusion about roles and functions, and that's why we have seen some sort of diluted efforts and mixing up of responsibilities and accountabilities all over the place. We're in a world that is suffering from deficit in trust, as emphasized by the Secretary General of the United Nations, and at the same time, it is suffering from surplus of crises. And climate is not the only crisis we are facing. And it is really sad and bad to report to you that some of the proposals that have been put forward to deal with climate action didn't deal with the priorities of developing economies and emerging markets. They were suffering from lack of knowledge and information. They were suffering from a reductionist approach for climate action to mean only reducing emissions, while it is very important to reduce emissions, but not at the expense of just transition, not at the expense of getting more people to lose their jobs, not at the expense of having more people suffering from poverty. And when I say that, it's basically a simple call for bringing climate action where it should belong as part of the Sustainable Development Goals. Climate action is SDG 13, and the rest of what I just mentioned now, the right to work, the right to be alleviated out from poverty, the right to have decent education, the right to have access to health, the right to live decent life, the right to ensure dignity is basically about not getting a reductionist approach to climate. This agenda had been hijacked for many years by some countries and some leaders in countries that reach levels and standards of living of life and ensure the critical minimum of access to the privileges of welfare state and reach a per capita income that enable them to ensure more than the critical minimum of the basic needs, but basically by enjoying life. So they are ensuring as well that this life will be maintained to be sustainable, which indeed they're right. But this agenda has never been inclusive. If it is inclusive, instead of just listening to lectures about the importance of climate and climate action, instead of getting some leaders preaching us about what we should be doing, forgetting that their countries has never, since 2009, has never delivered on their commitment of the 100 billion. And I keep saying and emphasizing that out of 23 countries required to provide their fair share of contribution of the 100 billion, only 7 countries out of the 23 are doing that. The rest are just providing a very small fraction of this, and perhaps they fill the gap by words and by preaching and by encouraging others to do more than what they can afford. And these countries in particular had been responsible for the mess that we're in. These countries in particular have been with finance, with science, that can really solve the problem. And in each part of negotiations, they imply or they push that it is not their problem alone, it's a collective responsibility. It was not collective responsibility in the first industrial revolution to burn the world left and right. It is not really collective responsibility to see some of the technology that was used 200 years ago retrieved back again and then the poor pay more and bear what they should. So it's basically this kind of principles of work to where exactly we should be directing the attention and focus. This agenda is technology and science-based, climate action. This agenda will not be resolved but by finance. This agenda will not be fixed but through revolution in leadership and getting the responsibility where it should be. In an implementation COP, I'm expecting the following in the 4 lines of business. In mitigation, we require finance to support the private sector, and we require finance in areas that the private sector cannot really be reaching because of high risk or because of lack of capacity. And we provided some solutions in partnership at COP27 with the UN system, the regional economic commissions, and the civil society organizations helped us to prioritize projects where they should be. And available on our websites, you'll be seeing lists of bankable and investable projects in a form of a pipeline. So for those of you who claim that developing economies do not have pipeline of projects, we're putting more than 50 projects here, actually 50 to be exact, in this COP, but we have more than 450 submissions of projects covering all developing economies and emerging markets, and we filtered them down to 120, requiring $120 billion of finance. They are covering all, and we started actually with Africa, and we ended with the emerging markets in Europe, and we have Asia, Latin America, and the Middle East and Arab countries covered in this. So for those who claim that they have the money, but they don't find the pipeline of projects, they need to revisit that, because there is a list of bankable, investable projects with just transition into consideration, with the impact on society being fully considered when these projects were selected. The other thing, I see you wearing this nice logo on the governance initiative. And this is coming out from interaction with civil society in Egypt. Answering a very simple question from a fellow villager from my own village, and now it's a big town, but I still like to call it a village, out of nostalgia to the old days, which is only 40 years ago. When they asked us why Egypt, in such conditions in the world, when we're seeing these tough political economy dynamics, is hosting this COP. What's in it for us? And this is a legitimate question, and I like what Ilham mentioned about the issue of communication, because when we talk to each other here, including civil society representatives, we assume wrongly that everybody else is engaged. Actually, based on a Gallup report, only 51% of the population surveyed from advanced and developing economies claim that they know something about climate action. They are very honest about that. When similar surveys conducted, like in this country by Basira, which is a very well-known team working on statistics and sampling, around 65% have no clue until days before this COP about the importance of climate change. They may feel it in different ways. They may call it something different. They may realize it in the day-to-day kind of farming or fishing or the kind of investment that they have to do more in resilience, but they don't use, to the point raised by Ilham, the same language. So I think there is an effort here. So to sum it up, we, through the help of civil society organizations, many thanks to you, Dr. Imad, and many others in making this a success for Egypt, and we like to have this experience that had projects mobilized from the 27 governors of the country and showcased. And I'm happy that the majority of the submissions of the 6,200 projects and initiatives came from the nonprofit community development projects, and many of the winners are with us in the Green Zone, which is vibrant and very interactive as well in the way that they showcase their work. Through the UN system and through the international organizations, including those of civil society, would like to share our experience in preparation of the COP. And I know my very smart colleagues hosting COP 28 in Dubai will be building on this work. So again, an implementation COP. Some people will be going home, relax. Some people will be staying, I hope, for more days in Sharm el-Sheikh and Egypt to enjoy. But in the following week, there's going to be a year of action on day-to-day kind of basis. Are we doing better in finance? And who is going to be filling the gaps on funding? Are we doing better in sharing knowledge and science, because scientific solutions are there? But then for the civil society, the conscience of implementation, and because we don't really have a serious accountability mechanism, despite too much talk. We as from Egypt here, we cannot just go and tell a country that is owing the world funding why they didn't do that work. But they have their own people, they have their own parliament, and they have their own civil society organizations that they can really reflect the voice of those who are suffering because of mishandling these files for many years. So we rely on the civil society in the three fronts of action: finance, science, and changing behavior through this kind of work of engagement and partnerships. Without the work of the civil society organizations, the NGOs, and the participants that are coming now with solutions, and this is my final word, that unlike the past, women, disadvantaged groups, even children, came up with lists of complaints about what happened to them because of climate injustice. What was different in Sharm el-Sheikh, that these groups came with evidence and came, more importantly, with applicable solutions. And for that, we respect the work, the seriousness, and we look forward to more engagements and partnership for getting this big problem, existential one, facing us all, fixed in the rest of the years from now until 2030. Thank you so much.